making it big, we interview some of the unsung heroes behind the screens that make movies and television come to life. My name is Sarah, and my father is John, a professional Foley artist in the movie business for over 40 years. He's worked on over 500 films and is a 37-time nominated and 9-time MPSC winner for movies such as Inception, The Matrix, and The Dark Knight. We've made it our mission to inspire you to achieve your dreams. Welcome to the Right Stuff Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of The Right Stuff. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in this week and for giving us your input. It's really important for me to have an open line of communication with everyone because I genuinely want to do everything I can to help you pursue your dreams. And I want to provide you with Foley information or just entertaining content if that's what you're looking for. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that life is a choice. Each and every day we wake up and we make choices, and those choices impact us positively or negatively, even sometimes neutrally. And I want you to wake up excited. I want you to wake up and know your life has value and meaning. We want you to know that it is possible to make good choices and take steps each and every day to get to where you want to be. Even in the process of creating this podcast, I had to be patient, which has never been one of my favorite virtues. And I've had to take tiny baby steps. I've had the idea to create this since the end of November, beginning of December, and it is now the last day of May. It is May 31st, but I have not given up. I've spent countless hours researching, learning to edit, getting equipment, and I'm still not great at everything, but that's life. No matter how perfect I want this to be, I know that it can't be absolutely perfect in every aspect of what I'm trying to do. But my point is that what's great about trying something new is that you do fail and you do learn from that if that is what you choose. Today, we are doing our first interview. I'm so excited because we are talking to the coolest woman ever, you guys. I can't say enough wonderful things about you, Shelley. We're very lucky to have you. Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Woohoo!
It's an honor to be here.
Yay, thank you. It's an honor for me to interview you. So why don't you take us back to the beginning before you were a Foley artist? What did you think that you wanted to be when you grew up? What was your life plan?
You know, that's a very good question. I loved animals, and I thought I'd be working as a veterinarian. And I also loved Tom and Jerry, and I was so into making noises vocally, and I was very obnoxious as a child. So even my friends said, you should be a comedian, or you should be doing voices for animation. And so I grew up with that in my mind, even though it didn't feel practical to me at all, because I grew up in a very small town of 14,000 people outside of Rochester, New York. And that, to a child living in Victor, New York, is a dream that seems very far away, because in front of you, you see your parents working as blue-collar workers, as secretaries, or my dad was a cable guy, and the idea of doing something for TV was so far-fetched because nobody around me was doing that.
Right. So what was your first job? Not necessarily in Foley, just in general, your first job.
My first job that I actually kept, or my first job ever?
Ever, or kept, whichever one you want to pick.
Okay, because for 3 months, when I was 14 years old, I don't know why, I thought I was ready to start working because that was insane, because I was having too much fun. So I actually took a job at KFC.
Really?
And I was making biscuits for 3 months, and then I just realized I was missing my track meets, so I quit.
Right.
But anyway, you shouldn't be working at age 14. Kids, take your time. Seriously, you're going to be working your entire life. So think before you take a job at age 14. So my first job that I totally loved was I worked for a glass artist in town.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I got to do neat things with his perfume bottles and vases. I say vase because I'm from Victor, New York. And I got to take this X-Acto knife and cut pieces of masking tape and put them very delicately on the vase to cover up the areas that weren't going to be frosted. So it was called masking, and then I would do sandblasting. So I love the environment of the artist workshop, and we would listen to NPR, and there was just this very eccentric, cool dude blowing glass in the other room, and I was sitting quietly at a table concentrating on doing very mechanical stuff that was artistic as well. So
have you always been very artistic?
Yes, actually. There's a picture of Mickey Mouse behind me at my desk that I drew when I was 8 years old.
Stop, really? That's so cute. And for an 8-year-old, that's really good.
Yeah, so I've always drawn, always copied pictures of animated characters, and have always gotten attention for that. And I won scholarships, and I thought I was going to go to art school, actually. So that's a whole other story.
Where'd you end up going to school?
I went to Ithaca College, and I went there because, first of all, my parents pooled together the money, and I pulled together my money, and that's what we could afford. My dream was to go to Rhode Island School of Design, and I got in, which it's very hard to get in, but we couldn't afford it. Right. So I'm curious always what my life path would have been if I went there.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm really happy where I am right now.
Yeah,
so.
you can't what if, because then you're here, and that's what matters.
Oh, I don't regret a thing.
Good. Okay, so what did you study in school? Did you study film at all, or was this even on your radar?
Well, Foley wasn't on my radar, but I did study film and photography.
You did? Okay.
And I loved it very much. I love the collaborative, creative aspect of it, and just being out in the field and shooting stuff with my friends. We each would cast one another as either actors or technical people, and I was always the camera person, actually, funnily enough. But that all changed one year when I applied to be in a special class, which was a summer class. My professor, one of our professors, was doing a feature film, and he was choosing a crew. So I applied for the camera department, of course, but he put me in sound. So this is where it all changed for me.
Isn't that interesting? People just picking your life path for
pretty
you,
much, yeah. Yeah, part of it is funny because part of it is you choosing and part of it is allowing
it to happen. Exactly.
It's very hard to find that balance, and you can't go crazy in your brain thinking about it. Just let it happen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's good. So you kind of went with the flow, and then how was that job with the sound? Did you immediately feel a connection with it, or was it like, oh, I don't know about this?
Well, I liked that I could be in my own little world, like observing and listening, because I've always been that kind of person anyway. And so I could just put my headphones on and be recording and not have to participate in social interaction at all. Although I'm a social person, it's just nice to kind of be in the world and just hearing the world from that perspective. I really enjoyed that. And the technical part of sound, I enjoyed. However, I still had a ton of energy and a love for sports and a love for performance inside of me that I needed to express somehow, and I had no idea that it would all come together one day.
And kind of manifest in Foley. So when you kind of discovered sound, when was that the first Foley job that you did, or was it?
That was actually on production. I was an on-set production sound recordist.
So you were a sound recordist. So what was your first Foley job? I see your first credited one on IMDb was 1997, Sliding Home. But I know not always the first one is what you actually worked on.
True. That is absolutely true. I didn't experience Foley at all until I worked as an intern for a post-production sound company. So my college had an option to do a semester in LA, or as an art minor, I was going to do a semester in Florence, Italy. LA seemed the right path because it would allow me to explore a career, and that was absolutely the right decision to make.
Right.
Although Florence was so much more romantic.
I think the idea of it is just traveling abroad.
Of course.
And,
yeah, and painting for a whole semester.
Amazing.
I mean, it sounds great, but would I have been an art teacher maybe? Would I have been an art therapist? You never know. But anyway, so onward to LA. So I applied, I got in. They sent us to Los Angeles for a semester. It was a new program, so I was the second group who went to LA. And we lived in the Oakwood Apartments down in Barham Boulevard. And I found an internship with Sound Deluxe, which was a wonderful private company back in 1995. And it was like one level of people that were in a circle. And so as I was doing my internship, I got to get to know everybody, and I found them to be so kind and helpful, and they taught me how to be an assistant editor if I wanted to be. And that was actually going to be my path, being an assistant editor. But they had acquired a Foley stage, and I began again hanging out over there, and I thought it was amazing. Of course, anyone looking at Foley thinks it's incredible because it's just people playing really in a room in front of like performing to the picture on the screen, which is, I mean, what could be cooler? So my first experience was working on a student film. So when I interned, I would work 8 hours, and then the president of the company got a bunch of student filmmakers coming in saying, please help us. We need our post-production sound completed, please. And so he turned to me and said, hey, do you want to be a supervisor? And I thought, cool, I could edit, I could do whatever else. And the first client of mine said, I would like a whole Foley job to be done. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Because the Foley artists are busy, and I'm not going to ask them to do something for free. So I said, can I use your stage when you're done with work? And so I did. And then I asked the transfer guy to come record me. And we had no idea what we were doing. But I actually slipped on shoes belonging to the guys that worked there.
Really? Oh, no.
Because I didn't have any shoes. So I was trying on like these size 11 shoes and walking in them because I needed men's hard shoes.
Yeah.
So since I didn't know what I was doing, I brought along a sound supervisor who knew about Foley and knew what it entailed. And he watched me and said, you should really think about going into this as a career. And I thought, maybe. Okay, cool. Because I was still on my path to becoming a apprentice sound editor with some really awesome people.
But that's interesting that he recognized the talent in you. And
yeah,
he
surprised.
So did you let those words sink in after a while and just think, maybe I really could?
Yeah, of course. I kept it in the back of my mind for sure. And then something happened that launched me into it, which was digital started to make its way into the film industry. And so the apprentice position, the assistant position, those all kind of whittled down to one, digital assistant and first assistant. So I saw a lack of opportunity there. There were all these people ahead of me, and I said, okay, that's not my thing to do. I have to figure out something else. So when I was doing all these freebies, I was in touch with a friend of mine who went to Ithaca College, and he said, hey, I'm doing a movie and I have backing, and what are you doing? And I said, oh, well, I'm kind of doing Foley. And he's like, I want you to do Foley on my film. And he was bringing it to a small company, and he said, I'm going to tell them that I want you to do Foley on my film. And I said, okay, as long as, it doesn't kick anybody else out of a job. And luckily it didn't, because they needed a night person, and I did Foley on this film. And again, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I just went into the job and just was like, okay, I'll learn it as I go.
Right. But that's awesome that you went in and you gave it your all, and you just said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And that's how you learn. Like, the whole premise of this is, no one's going to be perfect right away.
Absolutely.
That's just how it is in life when you're learning a new skill. And I think that you and a lot of people that we're going to be talking to have a really interesting pattern of when you do stuff, for free, like pro bono, that opens up all these doors that might not be open if you closed yourself off and said, I don't really want to. I'm looking for paid opportunities. And so it's really interesting how it's brought you, and like it brought my dad, all these opportunities that you wouldn't have had
your dad
otherwise.
Was my partner, by the way, John Rush. Well, so when I was at Sound Deluxe, the person I was working with, my mentor, Karen Baker Landers, who's an awesome woman, she said, you should get in touch with other Foley artists. I'm like, yeah, I totally want to learn from them. She's like, I know this guy, John Rush. You should give him a call. Maybe you could visit the stage. So I called him, and I made contact with him, and I went to have lunch with he and his partner and his mixer. And I've kept in touch with him ever since. And I had no idea I would end up being his partner today. It's very important to have a mentor, I think, especially if you're flying blind like I was completely. So it was helpful.
So you met him, and then where did you go from there? Did you stay kind of at one Foley stage, or did you kind of bounce around to all these other ones? Or
I worked at this one place called Ground Control, and started my career off there. And they just fed me feature after feature. And I worked at night from 5:30 to 2 in the morning by myself because I was non-union. So sometimes non-union Foley artists work by themselves because of the budgets. And I just learned on the job. And I probably worked there for a year. And then the facility flooded.
Really? Oh, no.
Yes. So I had to figure something out. So yes, I bounced around for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just solicit other companies and see if they needed somebody and maybe work as a substitute for a while. And I'd freelance all over the place and never know where my next job was coming. And at one point, there was such little work that I had to take a office job again. But then I got back into Foley by working double shifts. So I was doing my office job during the day and double shifting at night. So sometimes it's a really long journey, and you have to really, they call it paying your dues. I just like to call it just taking your opportunities as you get them and just working really hard to get to where you want to be.
Down the line, you've worked on TV shows, movies. I saw that you worked on Desperate Housewives, Tangled, I think I saw in there. Is that right?
That was a movie, I think.
Yeah, that was a movie. The 100, a bunch of other really awesome shows.
I was working as a non-union Foley artist for several years by myself and working with mixers who were also new. So we would learn together on the job, and it was beneficial because I had to be resourceful. I was working in a closet that had 0 props, so I had to go out and buy props and do research about the movies before I worked on them because I didn't know if I would need something that I didn't have. I became aware of this organization called the Motion Picture Sound Editors, which was a group of my peers, and you had to be working for 5 years to be able to apply. And so I got my resume together as a independent, non-union Foley artist, and I got in, which was great. And they had these events, which were public events, and one of them happened to be a Foley event. So my mixer at the time and I were saying to ourselves, let's go spy on them and make sure we're doing it right. And so they happened to be these 2 women from Paramount, and I went up to them afterwards and gave them my card. And one of them said, oh my God, I just saw your name on a film and I was wondering who you are, and here you are right in front of me. And the craziest thing happened. She called me 2 weeks later and said, hey, I have a possible job for you at Paramount on the TV stage. And I'd never done TV. I'd always done features. So I was so excited to get the opportunity to work union.
Right.
And so that's how I got my first union job. It's just by showing up to a public event and talking to other Foley artists.
Meeting people.
Yes.
And involving yourself.
Yes.
Did you find that there was, since you said that you'd only worked on features, did you find that there was a vast difference between TV and the features that you'd done?
There is a vast difference between TV and features. There's more time and more diving into the character and the story in features. And I love that so much that I love just working on feature films and being with a character for 4 weeks and just being in the atmosphere of the film and knowing all the different dynamics that go on and coasting along in that way instead of just being on a TV show one day, go through it and walk quickly get it done. And of course you put your all into it as well, as much as you can, as much as you have time for. But it's not an immersive experience like working on a feature is. I worked at Paramount on Numbers and Medium and a bunch of other TV shows, but then I got laid off because they were outsourcing the Foley to other companies. So again, I had to find another way to make money. And so I think I went back and worked on features, on independent features, as well as getting union jobs whenever I could. And that is when your father called me and said, hey, Shelley, Warner Brothers has a night crew coming on my stage. Would you like to head up the night crew? I'm like, yes, absolutely. So here I am going back to nights, which I'm not a night person at all. But come on, this is a chance to get into Warner Brothers, maybe on a full-time basis. So I took that job and I worked there up until I came to Skywalker and really got to know John and Allison very well and worked with both of them and also worked on the other teams on the other stage and just really got to know everybody and had chances to be other people's partners. And then I declined the chance, or something better came along. And so when the time came to come up to Skywalker, first of all, I was blown away that the opportunity came to me at all. I assumed that there would be a ready-made team up here already, and it wouldn't involve me. So when the opportunity opened up for me, I wanted to try it out and make sure that it was a good fit, because it is so important to have the correct chemistry on a crew of 3 people who work in a dark room together every single day.
Right.
So luckily, I'm found the best 2 guys I've ever worked with in my life, and I am so happy, and I hope I retire here.
That's awesome. It's honoring to hear this story, and just to hear how humble you are and down to earth. I mean, I know you're a down to earth person just in general, but hearing this story is so, I don't know, it's really awesome to just hear how all of these things connected for you.
Thank you. Well, I remember hearing something back at Sound Deluxe when they had bagels every morning, back when they were a private company. They would have the employees gather every morning and talk and have bagels. And this one woman who was a former lawyer was an assistant, an executive assistant. And she was in her 30s and I was in my 20s. And she said, "Shelley, you have no idea what you're going to be when you're in your 20s. She's like, when you're in your 30s, you'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I would get there. And I couldn't wrap my brain around it because I was in my 20s and it didn't make any sense to me at all. But now I'm in my 40s and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I would end up here. No clue. But by remaining friends with your dad and just working really hard and caring about my work, I was able to keep working, because people want hard workers who are enthusiastic and who care.
So for you, what's the hardest part about Foley in general, and the best part?
The hardest part about Foley, I'm having a hard time trying to figure that out, because I love it so much that it's all kind of easy.
It's easy when you're doing something that you love, and even things that are a challenge, you just take it head on and you go with it.
But practically the hard things, I guess, would be, for example, if I'm doing a hero chasing the villain scene and it's on cement in bare feet. So physically that's challenging because first of all, you can't breathe. So you're kind of circular breathing, so you don't go as you're running.
Right, because you can't I've never thought about that before. So you can't pick up the sound from your breathing.
Exactly.
So that does sound physically difficult.
It is difficult. And if it's a long scene, it goes on for a while. So like, I can do this.
You're probably just blue in the face after that.
Yeah, usually after we stop, I'm just like, I just have to like really take it in because I've been breathing through my nose. And then bare feet, you really sometimes have to give a lot of weight to it. And so pounding into your body. So
I was going to ask you what the most difficult footstep was too. So you say bare feet for the most part?
I'd say if it needs weight, if bare feet need weight. But Scott, our wonderful mixer, helps me out with that.
Right.
And we have some fancy tools that we can employ now, and I don't have to work as hard, meaning I don't have to hurt my body.
Right.
Because that's important. I kind of want to last for 20 years, maybe 30 years.
I don't think people realize how physical this is. I mean, you guys do body falls and you're running. And I mean, there is a certain you could, play around with all this stuff. But at the same time, it's very physical.
It is.
What you guys are doing.
It looks like a blast. And it is if you love it. If it's what you want to do for every day, the rest of your life, then it's easier. Sometimes it's challenging when it is all physical, like the whole day is physical, video games, providing all the punch sounds and throwing stuff really hard. But I am a very physical person, and I love that. I need to get that out of my the energy out. So it's actually therapeutic.
And if you love it, it works. I never understood. So when my dad would come here and he'd come home and he'd sit and he'd watch a movie or he'd do something, I just thought it was just him relaxing at the end of the day. It was only really recently that I realized that he's not watching the movies. He's listening to the Foley. And so it was, I don't know, it was exciting for me to see, he really genuinely loves this. He's going to work and then he's coming home and he's working. So that was really interesting for me to see too, that, if you love it, you think about it all the time. You figure out ways to make it work. And it's just awesome.
Yes. Like I'm always looking in salvage yards for something interesting. And I get really excited at salvage yards because I go around rapping on things.
And speaking of fun things that you salvage and you find, what is your favorite Foley prop that you have or that's here, I guess?
I think my favorite one is ones that I've made.
You've made Foley props. Wait, Shelley.
Yeah, some of them are hanging right at the end of the desk there.
Really?
Like, yes,
Huh.
those spools of thread
Thread
are
and-
from Alice Through the Looking Glass. I just strung them together from your grandmother's sewing kit
Really?
because I needed the bobbins,
Huh.
and they're sewn together in such a way, and I put them with a metal chain so that I could imitate the sound of Johnny Depp's character
That's
frolicking through the woods.
awesome.
And then there's a bark bracelet right next to it.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So in this lovely film, I really love the independent films because usually they're all about the heart and soul of human beings. And that one was. And it was about this little girl who finds herself in a forest and she makes a bark bracelet for somebody who helped her. And so I just collected some bark and I sewed it together so it would sound,
Just like it. So you literally made like a bark bracelet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's interesting how all your artistic talents have carried over into the prop world. What is your advice for kids who want to break into the film industry?
So if I wanted to be a Foley artist and I was in my 20s, what I would do is make contact with other Foley artists that are already working. Very, very important. First of all, you need people behind you. You need people to speak to who know more about the business than you do at the time. You need mentors. It's so important to have mentors, to have people to look up to, who you can ask questions to. Am I doing this chair sit right? Oh no, you don't use your butt? Oh my gosh. Oh, you use a cloth on a chair? Oh, I had no idea. Things like that.
You want to make yourself an expert in your field.
Yes. So just align yourselves with people who will help you. And I'm not saying give you a free ride. You still are going to have to work. So speaking of work, seek out those opportunities where you can sit in and watch Foley artists or go to non-union places, especially where they need people that are very skilled and maybe there's a lack of those people because they're moving up because it's constantly shifting in LA. I know a lot about the LA Foley industry. There are people moving around all the time. There are stages closing, there are stages opening. I mean, it is for 20 years I have seen it move. I have seen partners shift. I have seen stages close. I've seen stages open. It's always changing. Look for opportunities in those moments.
And there's no harm in asking, too. If you don't ask, nothing's ever going to happen.
No.
So you have to put yourself out
You
there.
absolutely have to ask, and you will come up against people who definitely want to help you, and you will also come up against people who might feel threatened by you. That's just the nature of the business, especially in Los Angeles.
But you really have to stick with those people who are going to lift you up and who recognize that when you're working with other people, that is when you're the most successful.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what I really admire about you and my dad is that you both realize that when you surround yourself with really good, positive people, that's how you get to achieve wonderful things.
I think you said it very, very well because if you're threatened by somebody new, then you're missing out on so many opportunities to grow and to be friends with somebody who's on your side, So I so appreciate that in your father that he sees, even though he's been in this business way longer than me, he sees how I can help make this team better. And it feels like we're all equals on the stage and we all have a voice. And so the atmosphere that's created is openness and creativity and lightness and fun. And you can't do creative work when you're in a dark, dismal, threatening atmosphere. So this creative atmosphere of fun and goodness is what I've always been looking for, and it's here at Skywalker.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Shelley, for letting me sit down with you and talk to you and ask you all these questions.
Sure.
And I think all of our listeners are really going to appreciate it and admire your story and use it to help, guide themselves to do what they want to do, if it's in the film industry or in other avenues of life. So thank you so much.
I hope I do help at least one person.
Yeah.
Thank you for this
That's the
opportunity.
mission here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
All right.
I want to once again thank Shelley for joining us on The Right Scuff, and I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate you listening. And listen, if you want to help out to support the podcast, one of the best things you could do is just go online to iTunes, give us 5 stars, and leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. Another good way to support us is through the Amazon affiliate program. You could find the link on our FAQ or in the description on our YouTube channel. It's called Height Scuff -20. I think it just mashed the right scuff together. So it's HEIGHTCUFF-20, and using that on Amazon doesn't charge you anything extra. It just gives us a little commission and helps us out to support the podcast. Once again, I want to thank you all for listening. I really appreciate any advice, any feedback, and I really hope you guys are loving it. We'll see you next week on The Right Scuff.